what engineering or cost benefit studies support the decision not to use them?
I will say, in terms of, is it undergrounding and lower voltage. Yeah, so, and this, you'll see this as part of the CPCN as well, in terms of, that's one of the requirements as part of the CPCN, is to demonstrate what some of these viable alternatives, including if you could have done this at a lower voltage alternative. And so that will be part of the CPCN, and you'll see that analysis captured in there.
And to put a little more context behind that, like MISO has done all of this analysis too, but the state of Wisconsin will require us to essentially do it again. They'll have their own criteria, their own assumptions that we'll have to use. We have to hire a firm that does just that thing. So we have to go through all of that again, and that has to be proved satisfactorily to the PSC for the CPCN to get issued. So what environmental assessments or environmental impact statements have been completed, and which ecological studies and field surveys were relied upon? So those have not been completed. We're working on that right now. The DNR will assist us with that, and they will actually hold a public meeting with the EIS to get comments from the public about it. Mike, this will probably be you. How will wetlands, streams, forests, and other sensitive habitats be affected, and what habitat impact or mitigation studies support these conclusions?
Luke, before you answer that question, can that be turned up at all? Or are you as loud as you can get on that?
Oh, there's a lot of knobs here.
Maybe located centrally.
Is that better?
People in the far corner, can you
How
hear
about
okay
people over
better?
there? Is that better?
Yeah.
Good.
Wetland streams, forests. That's part of, like they mentioned before, part of our siting criteria was to try to utilize existing infrastructure to minimize new impacts to these sites, because they're already in corridor. They will need to be widened. There will be a little bit of increase. Mitigation studies support these. Like he mentioned, during the CPCN application process, we will indicate exactly the footprints of all of our, both the proposed and the alternative route, like the route width, off right-of-way access routes, alternate workspaces that would be outside of those areas as well as staging areas that may be needed for the construction. Once that's completed, we turn that information over to in the application, and then we work with the DNR moving forward during the application process, where they put together the environmental impact statement for that.
So, what endangered or threatened species may be impacted? What biological surveys or species-specific research inform this assessment? Do you know of any off the top of your head? I know it'll have to be assessed as part of the CPCN, and that's the threatened and endangered process. What is that term called?
Yeah, threatened and endangered. For the state level review, it is called an endangered resource review. Any project we do, from the small substations all the way up to a project like this, we need to put in the footprint, or we submit it to the Wisconsin DNR. They run through their databases any threatened and endangered impacts that would be possible, or what species are in the area. With that, they will indicate, as we fine tune it, what management practices should be initiated for such any impacts to minimize them or eliminate the impacts to the species.
What research evaluates soil disturbance, erosion, and sedimentation risks during construction? So the specific question for research, I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that we are required to get a stormwater and pollution prevention plan. that is issued by DNR that has all sorts of requirements for what you have to do during construction and the levels of erosion. And you have to have, BMPs, best management practices, sediment logs. You have to revegetate after you're done. All of that sort of thing gets taken into account, and decompaction is one of the things that are considered. That's also a reason why, if you've ever gone by construction of a big transmission line, if like you drove down 90-94 when they're doing Badger Coulee and you saw all those timbers out in the field, we call those mat roads. That is to limit the compaction of the soil. So if that ever seemed like a strange thing to do, that's what they're trying to stop, among other things. But it's to limit the compaction. That's all part of that permit. So, what studies address long-term ecological effects of transmission corridors on wildlife movement, such as migratory paths and habitat fragmentation? Again, the CPCN looks at impacts to wildlife, and because this will be placed, or we're proposing to place it in the driftless region, they will look at the specific wildlife in this region. Moving on to agriculture. How will tower placement affect farming operations, equipment movement, crop yields, and drainage, and what agricultural impact studies support this assessment? So there will be an agricultural impact statement with the project. That's something that's also required to be completed. We are expecting fewer impacts to agriculture from this because there should be fewer structures. So, and there won't be any guy wires, any anchors in the ground. So it'll just be the base of the structure itself that'll have to be farmed around, and there will be fewer of them. So we think there will be fewer impacts to farming operations and equipment movement. Crop yields, so that typically comes up during construction, and as a part of the easement that we would be proposing, and the way that we've been operating the lines is that if Dairyland had to go out there, so even during construction, right? If that's when crops are on, then we are required to pay crop damages for the field and in any maintenance activity. Drainage, I don't know of any impacts to that. I'm guessing that might be a compaction question, but we are required to decompact and to mitigate any erosion. So farmland preservation or conservation program land be affected, and what legal or land use studies address these impacts? I would imagine that there's probably some CRP ground out there. We haven't looked at all of that in detail. That's kind of that's a little ways off yet. There's exceptions for some of that, and there's ways of working through it, but primarily what we do is work with the landowners on any of that, and that part of that comes through the CPCN as well. How was compensation for permanent and temporary land laws calculated, and what valuation studies or appraisal models were used? So none of that was done yet because we don't have a CPCN yet, so there's been no start to easement acquisitions, but that is all controlled statutorily. There's a very thorough statutes about compensation, and there's even more thorough case law on the subject. This has been going on for decades in the state, so very broad strokes. You have to get appraisals. The appraisals look at the amount of easement area that you would be acquiring, and then you look at the it's called just compensation. You determine that by looking at fair market value. Very broad strokes are an easy way to think of it. What's